What's going on, everybody? It's Matt, aka the Lumberjack Landlord, here with his good buddy Dion from Dion Talk Financial Freedom. Dion, it's Friday, man. How's your week been?
Howdy. It's going great. Worked in law enforcement for 8 years. So every time I hear you say AKA, I'm like, oh, that was like page 2, halfway down. These are the aliases the person's going by. Like, talk about trigger.
Yeah. AKA the Lumberjack Landlord, AKA in your face landlord, AKA tired of your excuses landlord, AKA here's your posted notice landlord. So it was a busy week. We had to work in a bunch of posting of eviction notices, which was interesting because we got dumped on 3 different snowstorms. And it was just like, it was brutal. The snowstorm thing was brutal. And then it was freezing. And then we had like 8 or 9 without power. And so people are like, hey, my heat doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, it kind of is attached to a boiler that needs electric ignition. So yeah, kind of guessed that. So is it a little bit dicey for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but we're finishing the week strong. So one of the things that you and I were texting back and forth on, like the 15-year-old schoolboys that we are when we're texting on our phones, you're a way faster texter than I am. I'm horrible at it.
That's because, and no kidding, that's because I'm always texting while I'm driving. And Millennial Mike is like, oh, I'm mailing him a ticket.
You're exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, I can't do it. And
by voice to text, it's all screen function. You don't even have to hold the phone, touch the phone. It's literally say the name, compose the text, send the text.
So I have like, Ukrainian sausages for fingers, if that's such a thing. And so they don't fit on this little device. And so
big hands, that means really big gloves.
Gloves, exactly. And so, and sadly, I couldn't properly type out a word. I'm a really good speller. I just can't prove it in text. Because it's and I gotta build out a massive autocorrect feature. But reason I wanted to, so we're doing our live stream on Fridays. I wanted to have this one with you, and the subject that I wanted to talk about was rent control. Because I think it is one of the major misconceptions that landlords would hate rent control. And just like the Crash Bros always talk about, oh, well, your portfolio is going to be worth 30% less. I don't care. I'm holding. I'm not selling. It's not a loss until I realize the loss. I already have 30-year fixed rate debt on the property, and the income will only go up over 5-year periods. It will only continue to go up and get better. So based on that, I don't care when the market crashes. I want it to crash. If it were not having to worry about people going through the pain of a crash, I'm far better prepared. I like a crash. I'd like to go buy a bunch more properties with all my cash on sale. Now, that being said, for rent control, we had talked a little bit about like what that argument is. As a free market capitalist, I don't like rent control, but let's walk through it and let's understand that rent control for landlords is actually a good thing.
So
yeah, I just sounded like you.
You sound, no, we should have been recording before. We should hit a record now. So there's 2 times rent control hit our radar while we were texting back and forth. So nationwide rent control has been proposed.
Yes.
Washington State has a bill on the books this year for statewide rent control. Currently, there's a revised Code of Washington, so an RCW, that says literally the first sentence of the RCW is rent control is illegal in Washington State. So there's a bill looking to overturn that, basically create new laws. So we were talking about it, and I'm actually going through the research phase of, and I like doing live streams because we just share information and it helps people. Yeah. I want to do 10-minute videos because some people don't want to click on a 1 or 2 hour, 3 hour video, right?
Both of us.
A 10-minute video takes 10 hours of research, right? And like make sure you get the data because you want to be able to, where's the source of the information? What's the actually whiteboard it out and make sure your math works. But I'm doing 5 major misconceptions with investors. The first one is they think we don't want to crash.
Right.
Okay. So second one is you think rent control benefits tenants, hurts landlords. That's a misconception. It really hurts tenants. And so there's I'm divided. It's a much bigger portion going to the one side than the other. But my small, I'm human. We always think of ourselves. So the selfish part of me says, okay, rent control would be awesome. But then the bigger portion of my mental energies is on it screws over a large group of people. And the really quick math is I, over the last decade, have been able to do a 5% rent increase every other year. And then if something weird happens like 2020, 2021, 2022, where we have a black swan event where we have a moratorium, forbearance issues, the pandemic, supply chain issues, wages spike, inflation, triples. It goes from the 2s to 3s to hit 9 once. And you can make a big rent adjustment to make up for the new cost of insurance and taxes and everything. So I was able to do 5% every other year. Right. If rent control happens, and I'm not sure what they're talking about nationally, in California, you can do 5% plus inflation up to 10. So the cap is 10. In Washington, they're just talking about Washington State, not DC. A 7% period, that's what it is. Which means I wouldn't have been able to make the adjustment in 2022. That's right. To make up for the one-time black swan event. And now I'm back to, it will be 5% every other year for the next decade, unless we have another black swan event that needs an adjustment to keep up with actual new costs. If rent control was in and I couldn't make that one-time adjustment for the last decade, instead of 5% every other year, I'd have to do 7% every year to in any way keep up with what could happen. And might not even be able to for some people who run their business wrong and don't account for expenses and CapEx and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So my tenants, instead of a average rent in my area is $2,000. So 5% every other year is $100 a year, right? Or $100 every other year. So $50 a year.
Yep.
7% would be what, 100 and more. You're the math guy, but it would literally, it's 140 a year. It would almost triple.
Correct.
My required rent increases to run a business that actually makes sense. Tell me what owner doesn't want their standardized rent increase tripled instead of let me run it myself. I can make an adjustment when something weird happens. That's right. And the market can determine. So like All Nighter Hater says, they never do good things. And let's take a housekeeping moment to point out that you and I are both looking at the chat on our phones. So when we're talking, we're not texting like 15-year-old school kids. Our tech isn't set up to be able to have 5 screens going and somebody telling us what questions are coming in. We're actually doing this live. So
true story.
True story.
True story. Yeah. So I think so to your point, this is my concern is that much like Crash Bros, they think that we don't want to crash. We do. We actually are better capitalized. We already have lines of credit. We already have banks that work with us. We're not viewed as just another person buying their home where they have a whole lot of other things to worry about. And to prove that that's a thing, look at Fannie and Freddie's new standards. The top score anymore of 740, which already puts you in the top like 15% or 18% when it comes to credit score. Now it's 780. 780 is going to be their new top credit score. It is really hard to have a 780. Really hard. That's
when Fannie and Freddie start looking for credit scores like I look for, there's a problem.
Exactly. But that's the thing is, so I look at it and I say, crash, yeah, I'll take one of those. I don't like the human element of it, but from a business perspective, the free market working, a crash is good because it will cleanse the system of people that can't afford to people that then can afford. But this is what I always talk about is that's the biggest transfer of wealth. Those are the biggest events that transfer wealth. It is not on the general day to day. It was when cataclysmic events happen and people that have cash and have credit and have the ability to access both of those, which rarely is a poorer or an average person, that's how the rich get richer is because they're able to relever and they're able to lever up. Go ahead.
Sorry, Rob points out a really good point here. Seattle came out with some laws that were like rent control. If a tenant doesn't like the rent increase of 10% or more, you have to give 6 months notice. If they don't like it, you have to pay 2 or 3 months of the rent to help them move, right? So it's a version of rent control. And they immediately lost within the next 6 months, 3,000 rental units. Some sold, So yeah, it helped the housing market and owners could buy, but 31% appreciation doesn't
Yeah.
mean it was easy for them to buy. But a lot of people move to midterm rentals, short-term rentals. So you're not impacted by rent control. So again, you lose rentals, which rent control drives up rents. If you don't think that's true, average rents in my area, $2,000. Show me the area in Los Angeles County where that's the average. And I mean, yeah, you can have your lower end stuff, but I mean, I'm in C class, average, not in a war zone, $2,000 all day long for 2 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms even goes for more. Rent control forces rents higher because, and you also have, so there's a few elements, and that's why I like to do research. So it doesn't sound like it's coming on the fly. But Rob points out people will switch from long-term to midterm or short-term. Other people will say, like happened in St. Paul, you pointed this out on the one rental at a time video. Not only did they not say we're not going to do next year's project, they canceled current projects in motion. Correct. Because if the investors can't make money, they won't buy. So the builders won't build. So you further limit a restricted resource. No bueno.
Yeah. I mean, this is so one of my one of the guys that I watch a lot of is a guy named Barry Cernlicht. And he's probably one of the biggest hoteliers in the world, Starwood Capital. During the economic collapse of when the pandemic started, he was able to borrow $100 million from a German bank for 1% money. And so he understood that he needed to get as much capital as he possibly could for as little money as he possibly could, because that was going to power his growth for years to come. What's really interesting is he said, based on current rates, they are finishing the projects that they have and not starting on any new ones. So like we always know, it takes time for that to work through the cycle. It does take time for that to work through the cycle, but it does in that term that, and in that time that it does. The interesting thing is that there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of other things going on, and there's knowing that something is coming and understanding the time by which it happens. Most of these major projects are going to be concluding this year, middle of the year, because a lot of people stopped doing stuff when the rates got really high end of last year. Middle to end of last year, stuff stopped what they call penciling out, meaning the numbers didn't make sense. So that's a big thing. And so what you'll find is the recession stuff, you'll find a lot of that stuff will start to occur in Q3 and Q4 because of the fact that these large organizations aren't taking on debt to finish projects, but more importantly, they're not taking on debt to start projects. And that's what interrupts the business cycle. And that's what interrupts supply. But Marina, thanks so much for the super chat. Happy Friday to you as well. You're welcome for the informative entertainment. I did just see one too. Create your shape. Welcome to the channel. Good to have you. Rent control is coming. I disagree. I think because nationally, it is a political issue and it's not going to make it through the current Washington that we have. And state-wise, I think it will in some states. And then what will happen is it will become the study, essentially the live study of which states are doing okay and which states aren't. I think that if you want to invest in LA as a landlord, I think I have a nice bridge I want to sell you.
I agree with create your shape. I think it's coming in some areas and it's going to get stronger in areas where it already exists.
Exactly.
And if you're in a state where rent control it comes in, make sure you look at the structure of the rent control. I know that it can change in the future and get worse or better. For instance, if you're house hacking a small multifamily, sometimes rent control doesn't apply to you in an area where rent control exists. If you own single family houses, sometimes it doesn't apply. Like it depends on who they're trying to target. And I think the problem with the study is, let's say they put rent control in Washington, where so far it's been illegal. Now let's just hypothetically, it is poof, there's rent control.
Yeah.
It won't cause a housing market crash.
No.
Landlords will go, yep, this is what we have to raise the rent every year now. So for 5-10 years, owners won't care.
Right.
Tenants won't realize for 5 or 10 years that, wow, rents have gone up 7% consistently every year since this happened. when it wasn't happening before. We had 2 years, 2021, 2022, where there was significant rent increases. But prior to that, we had probably 2 decades with a very slow, far less than 7% if you averaged it out, rent increase. So the study's going to look great for a while, and the only people getting screwed over are going to be tenants.
So that's really true. So one of the things that, it's really interesting is that as I look at, my portfolio, how I manage my portfolio, rent control actually helps me. The other interesting thing is that if you're not a landlord, if you are a landlord, you'll know some of this stuff. If you aren't landlord, you won't know a lot of this stuff. So if you are a landlord, you know that yes, rent control, if it's in your area, it will exist, but it will exist for that existing tenant. What it will do is it will allow and it will create the opportunity for landlords to do what they do as great operators, like I teach, and allows them to create and say, look at what the other options are. I can give a 60-day notice or a 30-day notice that I want to rehab the unit. I can post that notice. And what does that do? That forces the tenant out of their unit, which was never my intent anyway, but now I have nothing to lose. So now I give them a 30-day notice to say, I'm going to rehab your unit. Then I'm going to take the unit out of market for a couple of months. Dion's going to turn into a rehabber, and I'm going to rehab my unit. It's going to take a couple of months, but then I'm going to go back on the market. And then the old rent doesn't matter. The old rent no longer applies. So now I can go to market. So that's the danger for tenants when states, or even if the stupid federal government decides to put themselves in a position where they say, this is what we're going to do. They don't understand the business of landlording. That's pretty clear. They understand the business of investment, but they don't understand the business of landlording. And there are a bunch of other facilities at my fingertips because I'm a great operator. I know what I can do if for some reason we get hit with rent control. And that is, at that point, I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to lose except if I can only get a 3% like Minneapolis, or if it's 7% like Washington, or if it's 5 + 5 with a cap of 10 in California. Whatever the state rule is, we abide by those rules. However, there's always other options because almost no units are brand spanking new that are owned that are B's and C's. They're not new units. By definition, they're not new units. So they're going to end up getting taken back from the tenant and rehabbed, and then a significant increase of rent is added to that unit that is completely legal. So therefore, they're going to have to get very heavy in any state legislation and really take away your rights in order to make that work. Dion?
Yeah, and another impact to tenants is, let's say you just say, okay, I don't want to own in rent control area, so I'm going to sell.
Correct, sure.
Well, the common perception is investors want to buy vacant units. So again, kick the tenant out, rehab the unit, then sell it. It's the same. It does the same thing. It either jacks up their rent every single year, the maximum allowable amount, or makes them lose it. And if you are kicked out of your rental in an area that has rent control, anywhere you're going to move into is going to be at area average rent or higher.
Exactly.
Because they know they can't adjust in the future.
Exactly. All you approved, all you got done was making sure that they want and that they get more control over the free market of business. It's not the best idea. It's not the best approach. Corby Carter, thanks for the super chat. Great discussion. Many thanks. I appreciate that. Dion and I like to talk about stuff that impacts our business that we think other people can get some input on, because I think that it's just a major misnomer that a crash hurts real estate investors. It hurts flippers. It helps BRRRR guys, but it doesn't help long-term hold guys. It actually helps us because we have a different time horizon. I don't know what Dion's time horizon is, but my time horizon is 20 years. When I look at a deal, I'm not looking at it how it impacts me today. I'm looking at what that deal could be in 20 years. Does it check my box for cash flow right now? Awesome. But does it put me in an area which is growing, continues to grow, has things that are attracting people to the market? And that way in 20 years, I gain the appreciation, but it was a phenomenal cash producing asset for 20 years. There are buildings that I've bought from people. I bought a building from somebody that bought it in 1982. Rates were 13 something percent. They bought it in 1982. It was a 5-family that they paid $60,000 for in 1982. They made hundreds of thousands of dollars on the sale of it, but they made millions of dollars on the rent. Millions on the rent, only hundreds of thousands on selling of the asset. That's why cash flow is what you always are trying to buy. Rob, thanks so much. Rent control is a tax raising scheme. I think that tax raising scheme.
So it's a vote buying scheme, which then turns
Yeah.
into a tax scheme. I think Rob's right.
Yeah, it's 2 steps.
You-
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So it's a 2-step one. You want your college debt forgiven. You want rent control. You want higher taxes on corporations. You know, those corporations that employ you. We want to tax them into leaving the state. So if you want all these things, you vote for one party. You also get kind of like Create Your Shape talks about UBI being a concern.
Yeah.
The benefit that we have right now, and the reason why I think some of these things might hit states but not federally, is because of the structure we have right now in Washington, D.C. Right? We don't have one side owning all three like we did for the last 2 years. So some crazy things could happen, and look what happened. But we don't want all Republicans having the House, the Senate, and the president seat, right? We don't want all Democrats owning it, because
We don't.
they can do major changes. So business is uncertain what might happen. So business scales back.
Right.
When we have a divided government like this, they can't do big things. So there's UBI. I actually kind of think we already have one. If you're a single parent with 3 kids, you're going to get state medical in most places. You're going to get enough food to eat. You're probably going to get housing subsidy. So we have a basic income. If you have kids, if you're single, you don't have kids, we don't care about you, right? That's our society. So we kind of have that. And then rent control can happen at state level. But here's the one that was talked about on a federal level that I think would be great, but I don't think we have the structure to set it up either. They want to go away from an earned income tax and move to a consumption tax. So this bill was proposed in Washington, D.C., on going to a consumption tax. So you're taxed on what you spend instead of what you make, giving people more money to spend and having a bigger impact on, and the tax structure doesn't matter to me. The government's going to find a way to make the same amount of money or more.
Exactly.
Always. Here's what excites me. Shut down the IRS. Like, it doesn't need to exist if we have a consumption tax. We don't have people filing tax reforms. Those memes that go around saying, I'm the government, you need to guess how much you owe me, and if you guess wrong, I get to lock you up. Right? Isn't going to happen, but it would be awesome.
I don't disagree. I think at the end of the day, anytime the government gets involved, the federal government gets involved, they tend to screw things up. This is what we're experiencing with inflation. This is what we're experiencing with all of these things. Sadly, with the evictions that we've had to do, I've posted more eviction notices in the last 60 days than I had in the previous 19 years. That wasn't a lot. It's only 9. But these were almost always people that were on some sort of a program that ran out, and they didn't get a job. They didn't save any money. And literally the first month it came due, we were 11 for 11 that couldn't pay the first month's rent after they got off the emergency rental assistance program. 11 for 11. Numbers don't lie. And so at the end of the day, we try and work something out with them, and we were able to work something out with a number of them, but not all of them. And so it put us in a position where I don't want to make people homeless, but I also don't want to make myself homeless. And so I need the mortgage paid for, and that is done by your rent. And so the crazy thing is that my phone rings off the hook every time we post a new unit. Like, it's crazy to me. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see as things continue to flush out, because we have a number of these that we're doing now. We now are going to the court to schedule the hearings. When we go to court to schedule the hearings, I'm very interested to see what the time delay is. Is it typically a week? It's typically a week to 2. I'm wondering if it's going to be 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and how far out it's going to go. And so it's just going to be interesting to see, but it's government largely getting interfered with a free market system. And when they start picking winners and losers, it puts you in a position where you have to then operate and understand what the counter to that is going to be. So it should be interesting to see. Millennial Mike, I know, is working hard. Rent control is a vote buying scheme. And just like most vote buying schemes, it doesn't work, but it makes people feel like they're getting help. I think that's the biggest concern that I have, is that people really are excited about rent control because of what they saw happen with rent the last couple of years. But I can promise you 99 out of 100 of them have not sat down and looked at, hey, I've lived here for 10 years. Based on rent control, my numbers are going to be higher. I actually have a video coming out called Rent Control, or the perks of rent control, because it's going to show that landlords will make actually more money. So if you hate landlords making more money, it's something you should not want to have happen from a legislative perspective. And Dean and I were talking about it this week, actually, or today. And look at the 10-year period. Look at the 10-year period. Look at it if you raised 5% every other year. One of the things that Dion pointed out, which was actually brilliant, was the fact that if you look at that market and you say it's only 5% every year, okay, we go up 5% every year. The problem is everything got super inflated. Natural gas that we cover to pay for our heat for our clients or for our tenants, that doubled in price. How am I supposed to make up for doubled in price? Like,
You put it in the tenant's name, punishing the tenant again.
Exactly. So, or I account for a rent increase, but if my rent increase is capped, my only other option is, here you go. To that end, Dion, I want to transition a little bit, talk about an experience that I just had with housing department, where you don't know the answer to this yet, but I did send over the issue. So Dion and Millennial Mike and I, we have a group chat. We send stuff back and forth to each other all the time. As you guys know, I've done the video on FMR, which is fair market rents. It's what the government, it's under HUD.gov, FMR, fair market rents. It's what you're allowed to charge for fair market rents in your area when you're talking about housing or HUD or Section 8. What's really interesting is we have a unit. The reason that the landlord had to sell was because their combined income on the property was $2,600. They were losing money every month. And I bought the property knowing that, because I was just like, they don't know how to run a business. So I bought that. They were Section 8/housing tenants. I went back to Section 8/housing. They had not requested an increase in 6 years. So one of the units was paying $1,400 a month, and the current rate is $1,900 a month. I knew that in buying the asset. So I was buying an undervalued asset with an underpaying tenant, but only because a lazy step had not been done. I then requested of the housing authority, and I sent something to Dion and said, I'm sending the housing authority the increase. It's $1,901. And he was like, cool. So I sent it over, got an answer back the next day. We've looked at the report, and this unit only qualifies for $1,725. And they start citing all these silly policies and, well, you know, it's the age of the unit and it's the this and the that, and it hasn't gone through a gut rehab, blah, 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 blah. And so I sent it to Dion and Mike and I said, you guys ever heard of this? And he goes, yeah, basically you got a binder strategy. I was like, yeah, I mean, I was going to kind of kick him back in the shins, but okay. So I went back to him and I just said, hey guys, the FMR is 1901. It gives no caveats for when the unit was last rehabbed. It gives no caveats to the type of countertops that it has. It gives no caveat to anything to that end. And I said, market on this unit's probably about $2,100. If it's $2,100, here's the issue. I'm giving housing $200 a month, even at $1,900. So I'm certainly not going to give them $375 a month at $1,725. She responded back with, and she said, I'll process the increase for 1725. I wrote her back and I said, you're not listening. I am going to take the unit out of the Section 8 housing program. I will turn that 60-day rent increase notice into a 60-day vacate notice because I'm not going to take a $375 hit. And she responded back with, we cannot approve that. And I said, I completely understand. I appreciate your time. So be respectful. I completely understand. I appreciate your time. And I sent her the letter back and I said, but I will be changing the notice. I will be updating it this weekend. So it's still in that 60-day time frame, but we will give her notice to vacate for April 1. And within 24 hours, we got an answer back. I've gone to my director. They have approved the $1,901 and we are able to process that rent increase.
So I had almost the exact same experience. I had a counselor that was more on my side. So a lot of this comes down to the person, the human that you run into in that position.
I totally agree with you.
You have to do the work for them. They can't go to
Yes.
their manager and say, I like Matt, we want to pay him more, but they can go and say, look at these comps I found at 21, 2200. They're only asking to go to 19, which is what the FMR is for the area. And say, we're going to lose this person if we don't do this. Now, here's the benefit that most people don't understand on how this impacts the tenant. The tenant that I had that was getting the increase, when they said with me, it was they would pay 1,800. It was the most they would pay. I found comps at 23, 24, so they went to 22. Right, so it was very similar numbers. It was $300 more than what they were willing to do, basically. The tenant's portion of what they have to pay went down.
Right.
The increase made the housing authority say, hey, it's been like 3 years. We haven't reviewed this person's position based on the amount of this rent with their income. Their percentage changed a little, which impacted because of the increase. Their actual monthly payment went from like $610 to $480 or something like that. It was like over $100 less a month that they were having to pay because the rent went up.
Right. It's so important that you guys do the work. It's so important that you understand how to, in an elite fashion, manage your portfolio. It's a business. And while we aren't cut and dry, like, hey, too bad, can't pay rent, get out, there is a process. And at the end of the day, we do provide affordable housing. We've even been known to provide free housing in some circumstances. So we've done that. When you have size, so for those people out there that say money is just greed, it isn't, because you can actually help people with money, because that's usually what they need. And that can be helping them with housing, helping them with a bill, whatever. So we've done a lot of that stuff. But I can tell you that you need to be elite operators and be working to that end, because I didn't auto-magically figure all this stuff out. It was by going through the experience, walking through the process. If you walk that mile in the other man's shoes, you're likely to glean a much better understanding of where they're at, what they're going through, and trying to better understand. I thought it was really, really funny because I got somebody that posted on my channel that I had no idea what POR was and that I shouldn't be making decisions like this.
That person doesn't understand that your tenant's portion isn't going up this increase.
Exactly. Well, not
Really
only that,
quick.
no, go ahead.
Do you see Millennial Mike's comment about the email from Ashley that you had sent? Maybe you could share what that was.
Oh yeah. Matt, what was the email you told Ashley to send the, I can't say that.
Good old Mike trying to get you in trouble.
The PG version of it was, how do you like them apples? Yeah, that was the PG version. Just because, again, these are, you guys have to understand, we have rights too. We're not just here to do the bidding of our tenants and do the bidding of the government resources. We have rights too, and you have to fight for them. You have to say, no, this is not okay. It's not okay. Most people don't know that in most states, it's a felony to take a smoke detector out. It's a felony. It's a safety issue. And so when we tell people, don't touch the smokes, we had that one guy where I posted it on my Instagram account. He was literally taking out the smokes, and then Section 8 was cutting off my funding because he was taking out the smokes, and then he wouldn't let me back in to replace them because he was smoking in the unit, which was not approved. So now he's getting evicted.
It's almost like people suck.
It's
so
almost like that.
There's a reason.
I have a shirt that says sarcasm is how I hug. That kind of covers it.
Oh, there you go.
So good morning and afternoon to everybody. Super excited to have you here. Thanks again for all the super chats. Even little super chats, $1, $2, they super help the algorithm. Anytime we see a super chat like that happen, it gets pushed out to a bunch more people. And so we see a bunch more people jump in. And that's what we're here for. We're here to have fun with folks and talk about this stuff. Let's see. Jeff M. Hey, Jeff M. How you doing, my friend? All-nighter. Did you catch that Mark Moss video with Parker Lewis? So I think that's Rebel Capitalist stuff. I haven't seen that one, but I know that you were asking that of Hyder.
Do you watch Hartman?
Jason Hartman? Yeah. Not a lot, but I do watch some of his stuff. Yeah.
So I'm trying to find and going to kind of catch up on Hartman and Gammon and get some videos because people keep dropping their names and saying you should check these guys out.
Yeah.
I watched the Hartman video yesterday or this morning, maybe 45 minutes of why there's no housing crash coming.
What? No.
Yeah. Imagine that. It's like, wow, I've heard some of this before.
But why would
so now I see why people are sending them.
Yeah, but why would we listen to a guy who only has 30 years experience and built 5 real estate companies that he sold for tens of millions of dollars? Why would we listen to that guy?
That's why I need to listen is because I honestly don't know. I know that they've done stuff. So Gammon and Hartman, their names come up so much. I want to start their content. And so like any other viewer, it's going to be a channel I found. I have to go back to where I think I want to start from and then kind of catch up. So I don't even really know much about him, but it was kind of funny. When we say there's no crash coming, the hate comes out in the comments.
Oh, dear God. Yeah.
He says it, and there's this really, like, all of them were positive, and there's this one's like, I wonder why he's so optimistic on real estate. That was the closest to a ding that there was.
Yeah.
I was like, what magic is he doing? that he can say facts and not get attacked.
Because I think that he's not seen it because no one knows about his investments. Everyone thinks that, we're rooting for that because we're tied to our investments. It's not why. It's because we understand the math, which is why we continue to invest. It's not the other way around. We're not looking for support of our mindset. We know what our mindset is. What we're looking for is, Dion and I both come from the school of poke a hole in it. Like, poke a hole in it. Like, tell me where I'm wrong. Like, poke a hole in it. And if I can keep on answering you back with facts, you're not poking a hole in it. You think you are because you have a general understanding of things. But that's one of the things that you guys saw in one of the shorts that came out in the last couple of days about me, or that I did, was this is where tenants don't get it. Tenants don't look at it like a homeowner does, and homeowners don't look at it like an investor does. And because of that, you're going to constantly have a disconnect because they think it's one way and we know it's another because they're looking at a very cursory level. They're not understanding all the data that's out there and available to them. They just don't understand it. Factually speaking, I talk to homeowners all the time. They have no idea, or it's one buzzword or one buzz clip. Listen, it's factual. That's what the way it actually is. And the best interview I've seen with Hartman recently was on my good buddy, Uneducated Economist, Simon's channel. You guys got to go check that out. He did an amazing job with Jason. Had a great, I like Jason, but I'm like a super fan of Yui, Simon, and I'm a super fan of George Gammon's. George Gammon thinks it's going to be a big, huge crash. I just still think I think he's incorrect. I can see how he gets there, but I think we got a long way to go.
Well, the benefit is we can have different opinions. So let's look at Zuber, me, you, and this is a chance for Millennial Mike to put in writing in the chat what he expects to happen over the next year with home prices. Zuber expects it to be flat. He says, kind of been here, but done this. There's enough equilibrium in supply and demand. They both are going up and down like this all throughout the year. So we should probably see it flat. He's calling for the end of, we've seen the crash in transactions. It should not get worse. You're calling for prices to go down 5 to 10%.
10 to 20. 10 to 20.
10 to 20. So you've increased from when we did the first video on what we expected.
I think the very first one that we did, I think I said 10 to 20. If I said 5 to 10, yeah, kind of
Okay, so
the mantra.
10 to 20. So you expect prices to come down,
I do.
and that's from peak, really, not so
Yes.
much year over year. It's like from
Correct.
the peak, we're going to see that. Okay, I can totally see that for a bit, but I think when we get to the end of 2023, what I'm calling for is inflation to be the biggest factor.
Right.
We printed more currency in the last 2 years than the last 200. That's going to have an impact on how much currency it takes to buy an asset. So I'm probably the most wrong. I've lost dollars to both of you guys on almost everything we've ever bet. But we can all go, these are the things that could happen. All of them say hunt for the right deal, do the work, no average, get a better deal.
Yeah.
You're owning the property, even if a crash is coming, is a better benefit than waiting to try to time it. It's the videos that go, there's a crash coming, don't take any action, sit back for a year or two, wait to see what happens. For year after month after month after month, day after day, saying the exact same thing for a different reason every time. We're trying to interpret a chart a new way. And then trying to buy a house after telling everybody for 2 years that you shouldn't buy a house. Those are the ones that are frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it means that they're easily moved, right? Which is what we know is that it's that human feeling when you've been waiting for something for 2 years that you've been talking about that doesn't actually happen. And then you're like, kind of questioning yourself, like, did I maybe miss it? No, I couldn't have missed it. Like, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to start throwing lowball offers. What's really funny is I've talked to people a lot. I throw disrespectful lowball offers, and anybody that I talk to that's trying to buy real estate, I'm like, you have nothing to lose. Like I told them flat out, if you throw a low gross number, no one's going to even respond to you 6 months ago. Now, if you throw a low gross number, you do definitely get a response.
So, and what's funny is 2 weeks ago, you got more of a response than you get now. And so Jeff M here's making a call, which is really cool. I like it when people put it, like I'm putting it on video. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think prices are going to go up, right? Jeff is saying 40% crash is very likely, but then he kind of clarifies with, prices aren't just going to drop 40%. You're factoring in inflation, you're using nominal, right? And you're giving a 4-year time horizon, which is great because we've never seen market-wide bigger than a 9% drop in one 12-month period. So just for the people who say 40% in 2 months, okay, stop listening to that person. But when Jeff goes, here's what I kind of figure, here's the factors we can get us there. Here's what I would like to say to Jeff. Let's say we had a crystal ball and we can go 4 years in the future, and there was a nominal 40% crash. I would still buy a property today.
Yes.
Knowing that we're going to see that in 4 years. So even if that's the case, right? And Jeff, I think that's kind of an extreme call, right? I like every other investor, I hope you're right? That'd be awesome. Yeah. But I would still be buying today and all the way down, just like Zuber did from 2008 to 2012. He was buying all the way down, paying what, 28,000 or something for a house that he had paid 50 something thousand for, people telling him it's crazy, that the land is worth more than the building. And of course, we're buying for long term. So in 4 years, let's say this crash happens. And you said your horizon is about 20 years, Matt, right? Mine's infinite. I never plan on selling or tapping equity. I'm just buying for the cash flow. So I'm buying for the cash flow. I don't care what happens to the price. But in 20 years, even after a 40% crash, what do you think is going to happen with inflation and the value of those properties? It's a win.
It's a huge win. It's a huge win. So that's all. It's just time horizon for me. And I prefer not to have it in the stock market because who knows what that number is going to be when I have to start pulling revenue off of it. That's the beauty of real estate, is that if the market's down, if the market's up, it doesn't matter. My rents, they're not going to stay down for anything more than a year or two. And I still don't think rents are going down. In fact, I'm on record. I rented out 5 units in December. They were all more expensive than they were the last time they rented. I rented out 1, 2, 3 units in January, all more expensive than the last time they were rented, all of them. And all of my numbers for housing section 8, you guys saw my Instagram post, 7 units, just those 7 units that we've had under for over a year. Those 7 units, $2,400 a month increase, 0 cost to the tenant. And I'm waiting for the numbers back because I believe it's actually going to be a negative cost to the tenants. I believe that they will actually pay less now based on what inflation is. So again, I think the problem is that too many people wrap themselves around the axle about where it's going. I don't.
Absolutely. That is literally trying to time it.
Yeah.
Right.
You're trying to time it. You're going to lose. There are going to be 1 in 100 people that time it right. There's going to be 2 or 3 that got close or close enough. And then there's going to be 96% that just completely missed it. And you know what? That's who you need to worry about. One person might get it. 2 or 3 might get close. 96 are going to miss it. I don't need to worry about it because I got a 20-year time horizon. And everyone's saying, rents are going to go down, rents are going to go down, rents are going to go down. Yeah, here's a news flash for you. You know what the most they ever went down in one single year was? 4%. 4.
Was that 2009 when A properties dipped? Because
Yes.
B and C went up the year that went down 4%.
Agreed. And so not only do you have the fact that it was a special time and a special microcosm, but it was only 4%. And if you look at the percentage of rents that actually were from Series A or A class units, a majority of those reductions were in A class. That's why Dan and I love B and C. I know you might like C even more than B.
I just do for the demand, and in really bad economic times, more people look for C. And if somebody's living in my C and they lose their job,
yeah,
it's easier to go out and get another $20 an hour job than it is to go get a $150,000 a year job, $20 an hour job. So I've had tenants lose their job while being tenants, never missed a rent payment or had a late rent payment. Unemployment is enough to pay the rent, at least in Washington State, to when they change jobs. So I wouldn't mind owing B properties. I wouldn't want it with a smaller portfolio. I would want a percentage of a larger portfolio to be B.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we are. We're a larger percentage B. We're no A. The best that we have is an A class, A rehabbed property in a B area. That's the best that we have. And that's what I make a delineation on my rent box about, is that I don't want to own A class properties in an A class area, because guess what happens when you have a white collar recession like we're going to have? We're going to lose. Guys, you haven't seen anything on the job losses yet, but I can promise you it's going to be between 1 million, 1.5 million, which means that it might be 20% of all of tech. That's where all those job losses are going to happen. It's not happening at McDonald's. It's not happening at all these other places where they need laborers and workers on that entry level scale. So the places that are going to get hit are going to be those white collar jobs. And that means that the A class is going to be what suffers, but they're not going to go homeless. They're going to be like, you know what? Can I make enough to live in B class? I probably can. I don't want to live in C class, so I'll fight with everything I have to live in B class, but it's because they came from an A class. And I can tell you the A class stuff around me, they're building more and more of it. And I love it because their price for a 2-bedroom unit on the second or third floor is $2,800. And my price for that same unit is $1,800. And I make more money at 18 than they make at 28. So that's where the math comes into play. Millennial Mike, thanks for the big super chat. iBuyer manipulated markets will be affected the most. Totally agree. We talk about that all the time in our private chats. 20% decline. Cities with pricing way above median price, 10 to 20% cut over a couple of years. As we move through recession, cities below median, significantly lower declines. I totally agree with that. And I think that because we've talked a lot about that stuff too, I think the other big piece is I've been saying for the longest time, when the stock market's down 10, 20, 30%, or there's stocks that are getting pummeled 50%, all these people that invested in FANG, Facebook, Apple, Alphabet, all these people, what's the other one? Google,
Netflix and Google.
No, yeah, Netflix and Google. Yep. And so when you look at those stocks, they're down 20, 30, 40, 50% over the last year. What's really interesting about that is that it's just like I said, the people that had these big stock portfolios in those FANG stocks, guess what's happened? Their luxury real estate is up for sale and it's not selling. It's not selling. I looked at a property that was $1.79 million in Vegas. I wasn't looking to buy. I was looking to better understand the market. I was looking to buy, but not that house. 1.79 million. It sold for 1.24 million. Did that mean that it was way overpriced? Yes, for this market. Did that mean everybody was going to jump on and go, well, see, that's a 30% reduction or 40% reduction? It wasn't. The last time it sold for 500K 10 years ago. So they still more than doubled their money in 10 years on that asset. That's the crazy thing. That's the crazy. Amazon. Thank you, Stephen. That is the other A. Yes. Facebook, Amazon. Yes. Yes. Facebook, Apple. It's two A's. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Yep. Because now Apple's getting crushed too. Millennial Mike, thanks, dude. And I agree with you too, Jeff. If we start looking at nominal rates versus real rates and factoring in inflationary impact on the value of the dollar, then yes, you could get up to 40%. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, though, is that yes, that impacts things from a fiscal policy and understanding, but that's not how the real world works. No one's like, well, if I'm buying this now in today's dollars versus buying it before in yesterday's dollars, you don't have that option to choose when you want to buy a banana. Just is what it is. It's just more expensive. Just more expensive. Dion?
I think the duplexes I looked at in 2018 that were 300,000 are now 550,000. I think in 3 to 5 years, they're going to be 700,000. So while we might see ups and downs, the long track record is what we're looking at.
Yes.
And I never want or look or care about appreciation.
100%.
I'm not going to touch it. I have the recycled cash flow to a point. It's the stocks drop. So somebody who's investing with the 4% rule has this huge impact, right? If real estate prices drop, the buy and hold investor living on cash flow doesn't notice, doesn't care. Now, the net worth numbers is made up, usually factored wrong, and not relevant because who actually sells off everything they own and walks away with just the cash?
Yes.
Yeah, I see a super chat there from Rob.
Rob, thanks for the $2 super chat. Always appreciated, my friend. If Mike's here anyway, will not be in the Zoom. He's actually working.
We couldn't handle that much pretty. And he does have a job.
I didn't do my hair. I'd be so embarrassed.
You put as much time and energy into yours as I did.
It's a true story. The only problem is that mine looks far worse. So it's kind of, it's just the way it is. Hold on one second. Just Mrs. Lumberjack. But Fang, yes, Jordan Smith, thank you for doing that. Fang, it is 2 A's, F-A-A-N-G, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Yes. I always think that for some reason, I always try and replace one of the A's with Alphabet because that's technically Google's parent company. But yes, it is F-A-A-N-G. I'm commenting in between pulling over cars and handling collisions. Perfect. Let's see. Ready. I'm gonna be gross and I'm gonna eat something during my live stream likely. So Dave P, if you look at Q3 revised and Q3 for revised job listings, we actually lost jobs in 22. Current government numbers are fugazi. Yeah, understood. But Dave P, what are you going to do? Like overturn the system? Like it's how we measure it. So at the end of the day, everyone's always looking for like the real number. I mean, we can always be in pursuit of that. The problem is that's just not reality, because where are we going to get the real number? And that's the problem. That's the problem that I have, because I don't disagree with you. I agree entirely. I don't think most of the numbers, in fact, they've said, like Simon from the Uneducated Economist says, he said flat out, he's like, CPI, you can't trust the number anymore because they flat out only told you they weren't going to give you accurate numbers. They were only going to give you direction. Now, Simon knows a lot more about that stuff than I do, but I'm willing to take his word for it that they're really only going to talk about direction and not so much real numbers. So at the end of the day, what does all that mean? If you don't know what the definition of is, I'm still a buyer of real estate that makes me money on paper and in real life. That's all I can do. I can't figure out if I'm getting screwed on the way that the government is figuring, money flows and unemployment and recapture of unemployment and all this other stuff. Jeff, don't say cap rates. Cap rates are not something residential investors look at. I love Jeff. I think he's awesome. I know that he's going to get a great deal, but don't say cap rates. We never ever use that because cap rates account for no debt service. So
it just doesn't apply to residential investing. In apartments, it might be a away. Even then, you're going to, after you decide the cap rate looks good, I'm going to take a deeper dive. Now you start looking at the debt structure. But in residential, it's not used. It doesn't apply. It confuses a lot of people. Some people try to use it to sound smart. Listing agents will put it in their properties that they list, which means they are really looking for an uneducated investor.
Yes. Yeah. At the end of the day, like Dion said, like cap rates, that's not something that, if you are hearing a residential or somebody that's talking about like small multifamily, single family house talking cap rates, run the other way. They don't know what they're doing, because no real investor on small residential uses cap rates. Never, ever, ever. Dave P., you're welcome. Of course, very welcome. Guys, we don't want an echo chamber here. We're totally cool with being challenged. Now, we're not going to get political and we're not going to go off into la la land, but we are happy to have our ideas pushed back on, because if you can poke a hole in an idea that I have, then it gives me something to reconsider about how I run my business. However, the converse is true. If I'm running a business of over 100 units, I've been doing it for 20 years, I've done the number of transactions I've done, I've made the amount of money that I have, I can do whatever I want on a daily basis, then one would think that what I have to say about a certain situation probably should have just a little bit more bearing. If I own 49 homes versus a lot of people online that talk about their opinions about markets that own 0 homes, and they're not multi-million-dollar homes, they don't own a $10 million business, they're just pontificating about their belief system, totally fine. But I would just take those folks with a grain of salt, because they usually don't even know how to interpret charts properly. That's what we've seen a lot of. And that's really the biggest pandemic that I'm concerned about, is the lack of ability to properly read a chart. Jeff M. Okay, I'm still learning. Dude, you're all good. I can't make the numbers work on the payment and what I can charge for rent. So that's cash on cash, baby. And yeah, cash on cash sucks.
That was to sum up exactly what Jeff was saying. The deals he's looking at, the cash on cash sucks. You move on.
Exactly. And Jeff, that's exactly right. But that's why we do these live streams together, and why we like to chat about this stuff and talk about it as a group, is because we want to make sure that people that are investing, if you're a newbie and haven't been there yet, we want to make sure that you're using the right words that give you credibility, give you better understanding, because then you can research those topics. And if you literally look at cap rate as an example, and I'm not trying to make an example of you, Jeff, I'm talking broadly. If you look at cap rate, you need to be looking at commercial loans, larger debt, and that's not where anybody should start, in my opinion. I think that that's where the dangerous game comes into play.
Well, I think there are people that start in that asset class do just fine. I think
Sure.
We have, because what is your risk aversion? And,
Yes.
and you and me like fixed rate debt, long-term cash flow. If somebody was investing, let's I know Jeff's on a bunch of different platforms, and I've seen a lot of comments. What if you have an investor who's had 30 units, 60 units? I met a young guy who's got 56 on an island here in Washington because of his family. Well, he's now looking at residential, and in the very first conversation, he brings up cap rates, and I'm like, okay, cool. That worked for the asset class that you were coming from.
Absolutely.
But here's how this works. If I was going to go and start investing, which I'm not, I actually just did a short the other day on why I'm not going to ever own more than 4 units on one property is my goal. I would have to learn what a cap rate is and how it applies, and what the next step is after you find one that makes sense.
Yeah, and so what's really funny too is that often when you talk to your banks, so the reason why terminology is really important is because once you get over 10 loans, you're dealing with typically with a commercial loan officer. Commercial loan officer will try and make you talk in cap rate, but you don't want to do that, because yield, like Mike Zuber from One Rental at a Time uses, I use cash on cash or return on capital or any of these, it's all basically the same measure. It's what it is. It's basically the same measure. What they're most concerned about is that you have what's called a 1.2% debt coverage rate, DCR, debt coverage rate. And what that means is that if your costs are $10,000, they want your DCR to be 1.2 of that. So $12,000. So that's what they look at, is they look at what is your cost, $10,000. We want a DCR of $12,000, because they believe that over time, with that amount of DCR, that you're going to be more than okay, that you can handle anything that comes up, that you can handle vacancies, you can handle repairs, you can handle big projects, any of that stuff comes up. That's the number, that DCR is the number that most real estate investors, when they get to a certain size and they've gotten past their 10 mortgages, That's the number that I talk about the most, is because that's the number that makes you a sexy investor or an unsexy investor. Because my bank looks at it and they go, holy cow, you've got a 2.03 DCR. That means that I make a ton of money on my debt. And that means that because I'm making a ton of money on my debt, that they're more than happy to give me more debt.
I'm trying to do it in my head.
Yes.
I'm at almost 3. It's like
Yeah. No, dude, you're
800
killing
going
it.
out, 31,000 coming in, something like that. So it's like, yeah, it's almost a 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Debt
I haven't had
coverage.
to use those or have those conversations because I'm not a grown-up investor. I just did the 10, less than 10 conventional loans in my own name. So it's literally, oh, here's my tax return. So you're going to give me a bunch of money. And it's like, that's the conversation.
Don't let him fool you, folks. That's not the case at all. And certainly not how we refer to him in meetings. When we call him a child, it's usually other reasons.
True. I had to reach out to you and have you explain to me what is a personal financial statement. I had never filled one out till last year. There's no reason to until you start getting into. I was looking at a DSCR loan.
Yeah.
Also just transparency for anybody who isn't familiar with my actual content.
Yeah, please.
All of my loans are conventional. All of my properties are from the MLS. No wholesales, no flips, no off market, no nothing creative. Just super boring. Rinse and repeat.
You know what? Boring is sexy though. And if that's the case, Dion's Brad Pitt. So, we got that going for us. But that's the kind of debt, honestly, guys, bankers, they love boring. They don't like elaborate. They don't like, well, look at this. If I step on one foot and I put my thumb in the sky, I can block out the entire sun. That's why this deal is going to work. They hate that stuff. They want conservative. They want well thought out. They want what's the current structure. They want what's the future structure. They want what if that doesn't happen? What would you do in this case? That's where the DCR, debt coverage ratio of 1.2 on a typical loan with a bank, that's your more than 10th loan. That's the really easy equation that they run, is that they've done the math and they say, if you've got a 1.2, we feel really healthy and not risked or triggered by any of the projects that you're going to do. Jeff M., question for both of you, only if you want to share. What are the details of your most profitable property regarding cash flow? Dion, I'm going to let you share that one first because I'm going to just go off camera and grab the lunch that my wife gave me.
Sure.
So I'm going to let you share that first, and then I'll watch and eat.
Fair enough. Go ahead. So Jeff, it's normally if I'm going to talk about something like numbers like that, I want to have a whiteboard or have a chart or have a spreadsheet. So this is top of mind awareness, what I know of a property from a guy with memory issues. I have a single family house that's paid off. So cash flow wise, that one, it's rented for 22, taxes and insurance are a little less than 2,000 because it's kind of rural. It's off on a lake in a county that has really good taxes. So Thurston County, Washington, good place to invest. And then I set aside 200 for repairs and maintenance. So I'm making about 1,800 a month on that one property. When I decided to pay that off, I owed 121,000. When I decided to keep it, I owed 138,000. So I paid that down over years, and then I paid it off from 121 down to 0. So I have basically 121,000 of my own money in that to get that cash flow. I don't know if that's my best. It seems like the most from the smallest property, but my fourplex, I think, is the one that's cash flowing the best. I live here. I'm making profit $2,500 a month. It was $141,000 to acquire because it was a like $590,000 purchase. I did 20% down and had to put a roof on. So, and then I did a little deck work. It was the first purchase that I ever did that actually needed some repairs. So I'm 141,000 into it. House hacking, living for free, profiting. When I first moved in, $1,700 a month. Last year, binder strategy impacted, and now I make $2,500 a month. So if I move out and rent out this unit, it'll probably make $4,000 a month, which it's not the 1% rule, but it's probably my best return. I think that, but I mean, literally my portfolio is so small, I can go through each one. I've got a triplex where I think I've spent $200 and since I've owned it, and it cash flow on it was a 17% cash on cash return year one. So now it's like a 25 or 30% cash on cash return. But I don't have the numbers memorized on what the debt and income is on that one. It's probably harder when you have 137 or 39 units or 100 and 200 or whatever you have now. But what really makes a property worth owning, and this is not a number that's in stone, it's just a number I like, 3 years. You purchase a property in year one. Most people calculate the cash on cash return as, what is your payment? Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. What are you setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, and maybe property management? What's left is profit times out by 12, divided by your cost to acquire. So down payment, closing costs, immediate repairs. Almost everybody does that. Nobody leaves in the fact that you have a month without a mortgage when you first close on a property. So I closed on the fourplex first year, January 6, 2020. I've got the remainder of January's rent and all of February's rent from the units before I had a mortgage payment. That's not calculated in the cash on cash return. We run it like the PITI was every month. I'm setting aside every month. So it's not exact, but by year 3, I have not owned a property that wasn't above a 20% cash on cash return from the MLS using conventional lending. So was that enough time to eat, Matt?
There's enough time to cleanse the palate.
There you go.
Greatly appreciate. And I'm glad that I could provide some fantastic ASMR for you guys with my beard moving while I munch on my lunch.
And no French fries saved for later in it either. Good job.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, listen, don't knock it. This actually works a little bit sometimes. Like it's been tried. It's always like when I'm eating with my kids, I always end up with one like that, So a couple things. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I'll answer your go ahead.
I want to talk about the super chat really quick because I'm super childish and petty. Amafid says reventure and real estate mindset suck. So that's thank you for the super chat. We appreciate you pushing out the channel so that more people might see this. There is a YouTube channel. I think it is going to be the fastest growing small YouTube channel on YouTube, which I will pin a comment for after this. If it goes to, you might have to pin it, Matt, because it's your channel.
No, you're
a moderator. Okay. So I'll do that too.
Mm-hmm.
To a YouTube channel where I think their entire intent is to call out fake gurus. And they make some really good points. There's also a video coming up today from One Rental at a Time that talks about, some people's ability to read a spreadsheet. I don't know that anybody's content sucks. I think that the point of a YouTube channel for YouTube is to get eyes on the video. So if you're good at getting eyes on the video and you get a lot of subscribers, their channel doesn't suck. If their information is telling you, don't buy, time the market, doing all these things, I don't care if they say there's a crash coming or there's not a crash coming. If whatever the purpose of their content is telling somebody not to take action and giving you an excuse to not take action, that's my problem with the content. Not that they went super petty and said somebody with little dogs must be weird, like attack a guy because he has pets. Like, I'm childish and petty because I wanted to bring up the super chat, but I will absolutely say Travis knows what he's doing. He knows how to get eyes on videos.
Mm-hmm.
And he's making money from YouTube and affiliates where he's going to be able to buy a house that he's been telling people for years not to buy because there's a housing crash coming. Every 2 days, consistently for years, this is the new reason why there's a housing crash coming. If you want to talk about housing crashes and the things that can cause them and your YouTube channel grows for that, great. But if your follow-up advice is then don't take action, imagine, I won't even have to imagine. I'm me, 2020. Since 2020, I've purchased 3 properties.
Mm-hmm.
If I was watching crash videos and I didn't, I'd still be working. Like that's my biggest insult I can think to myself now is if I had money in a retirement account, I'd still be working. If I listened to crash videos, I'd still be working. If I went on a date, I'd still be working. Like there's this list of things that could ruin someone's life. And don't listen to somebody that's not an investor.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, now you can answer your best property cash flow wise.
Yes, I can do that. So I'll handle the super chat thing first, just so we can move past it. So the way that I view it is I actually had reached out to Travis to do something on his channel. When the first go of it, when there was a rift between him and Zuber, I just reached out to him. I wanted to have a conversation with him because I think that everybody can have their perspective on the housing market. My belief is that people often make, right, the bias, they often make an argument based on their experience. And my experience is becoming very wealthy investing in real estate. My experience is helping people that never had any chance of retiring early become wealthy based on investing in real estate. And so I've now done it, and I have 49 buildings that are cash producing assets. And I still learn in real estate every single day. And I learn from people smaller than me, not physically, because pretty much everybody's smaller than me. But I learn from people that are smaller portfolios. I learn from Dion. I learn from Mike. We gain perspective. I learn from guys that are bigger than me, 500 units, 600 units, 1,000 units. And so I think at the end of the day, I think what we always have to be careful of is I liked doing that video that I did with Travis because it wasn't an echo chamber. I knew going into it, we disagreed. I know now, even now, he still believes that we disagree. And we do disagree. I believe that there are going to be markets that quote unquote crash, but I think a median home price and people saying, oh, well, home prices are down, 10% month over month. They just aren't. There's a stand on one foot, put your thumb in the sky that gives you that kind of number. And here's what I can tell you. I look at my market every single day. Nothing is down about my market. Expensive move up buyer, expensive luxury buyer is sitting just like I said it would. And that's, I believe, what's going to pull down the median price is because there aren't going to be nearly as many transactions on the higher side. And median is if there are 100 deals, then you pick the one in the middle. That's median. You pick the middle deal. And whatever that sells for, that's what the median home price is. So where I believe that you were going to see this, not this correction is the proper word. Where I believe we're going to see it is I believe a lot of the high end stops selling because of the market and the economy. And a lot of wealthy owners, they own stocks, they own businesses that are going to slow down. They own businesses that might even go out of business. And then the move up buyer, no one's going to trade in a 2.5% or a 3% mortgage for a 5.5% or a 6% mortgage on a property that's priced even the same as it was a year ago, but it's actually still more expensive. So I believe a lot of the higher end transactions disappear. I believe a lot of the move up buyer transactions disappear. I believe that there's going to be, the movement is going to be in the people that are really rate sensitive. And the people that are rate sensitive, you're already seeing bidding wars come back because there's deals that can be done with interest rates in the 5s. So now that rates are coming back down, what are we seeing? We're not seeing the contention on price. We're seeing the contention on payment because that's where the contention always should have been. And so at the end of the day, I think that high-end transactions largely disappear. Move-up buyers more generally disappear because 83% of people have a mortgage sub 4. They're not going to give up that sub 4 mortgage for a 5.5 on a building that's priced, at even more than what theirs was. So I think we end up spending a lot more time in that bottom half of the market, where then the median price is going to reflect because you pick the transaction in the middle of an only bottom end market performing and the move up buyer and the luxury buyer aren't performing. That's where I think you're going to see that number come down. So that's my explanation of things. And I think that that's the difference between what people think is going to happen and not happen. I can tell you this, and Jeff, with your research, and Mike, Millennial Mike, with your research, stuff at that lower entry level is not getting less expensive. It's just not. I see it in my market. The entry level stuff is not. I wish it would, because I've got way more capital and I have access to capital a lot easier than 95% of home buyers and probably 80% of investors. I've got access to it. So if it dips 10 points, 20 points, dear heavens, 30 points, I am such a massive buyer. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for investors that recognize that you really make your money when you buy, and it's really about that payment. It is really not about what the cost of the house is. So if you can get, there was a deal that one bank did around us that was a 4.5% mortgage, but it was an ARM, but it was 10 years. 10 years. I would probably make that bet. That's me with my portfolio size. I would make that bet. Dion?
What I would look at for that arm is what are the terms after 10 years?
Mhm.
Can it reset to federal plus whatever, or can it only go up 2% or 1% or whatever? There's an arm that came out where it was a 3-year arm, but at the 3-year mark, it can only go up 1 full point, and then it can only go up 1.2 more times. So it can go up 3% total. So if the arm was better than 3% of current rates, lower, it would make sense to do the arm, as long as you can afford it when those increases come in. You're not counting on rent increases in the future or something, just benefit from it now. But lenders have short memories, and they forget that 2007, 2008, we had arms that didn't have a cap on what the adjustment could be when your arm hit. You could have a 3% go to 14.
Right. Yeah, the devil's in the details for sure. But I think that I had seen, so I don't, admittedly, I don't watch, I was watching Saks Realty. I watch Saks. I watch Todd. I think he's gotten a little too crash oriented because the numbers still don't prove it out. You can find a chart that can, it's just like a statistic. You can find a statistic that proves out your point. The question is how does it fit into the entire circle of statistics, right? Statistics lie, or you can make them lie. And so from my perspective, all I can look at is factually what's occurring for me on a daily basis. My rents all up. My vacancies all down. My project costs are higher in some respects and lower in others. Tenants, the ones that I've inherited, I see why the landlord sold the building, and that's what was expected. And so I think the big thing is, as we just look at it, you have to evaluate it for yourself. I think that if you say crash, 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 and then you're out there making offers on houses, even if they're ridiculous offers, then you really can't believe that much in your message of crash, because no one's going to invest and make the biggest purchase that they ever made in their lives if they really truly believe that the market is only going to go down. That's just my thought.
So that's where Zuber corrected me the other day to not be petty and be the bigger man or whatever. And he said, don't call somebody a liar. And I said, well, I'm not saying that they're lying. What I'm saying is, if somebody says the same thing every 2 years, every 2 days for 2 years, the same thing, and it's constantly not right, eventually they have to even think they're lying to themselves. That was what I was saying. But Jeff, you bring up here that my numbers look really good. I have a video on my channel called Why So Much Cash Flow. When you're growing your portfolio, you have, especially in that first 10 years, you kind of have two major paths that you can take. One is to recycle capital. So Zuber, Matt, even Millennial Mike, you're doing things like take out a home equity line of credit, sell a property to do a 1031 exchange, do a cash out refinance, take the money that you've grown, redeploy it for a better return, grow a bigger portfolio. So for that, in those first few years, cash flow might not look like much. Zuber actually created an alligator where his first property lost money. Right? The other two, as a whole, made enough to where it was a profitable exchange, but he created an alligator, only one, never do it again. I've never touched equity. I don't like to call it equity. I like to call it the ability to put debt on an existing asset. So it's slower. It was 2 years between purchases in the beginning, save a down payment, house hack, save a down payment, buy an investment property. And then I recycled cash flow instead of capital. So it starts slower, but the cash flow per asset is exponentially larger in the beginning. Years down the road, they're all going to destroy me. Cash flow, portfolio size, all of it is multiples of what mine is going to be, and is. But I'm not looking for size of portfolio. Right. I was looking for financial freedom. And the video, Why So Much Cash Flow, is because I don't touch equity. I save a down payment, no refinances. I invest it with strategies to limit tenant turnover. I use the binder strategy to increase rents, and I've added time to the portfolio. My portfolio started off much like yours. Not a lot of cash flow. My first year with my first single family house rental, this is what my cash flow looked like. From my job, making $17 an hour with a side hustle of playing World of Warcraft, which is where the word prawn comes from, because you got to get it past their algorithm too. And yes, like you type that a lot in chat. But I was able to save $12,000 from my job and my side hustle, making $17 an hour. I worked a lot of overtime. And with my rental that first year, I lost $6,000. So at the end of year one, I saved a total of $6,000 because I saved from work, lost money on my rental. It doesn't start with my properties are cash flowing. That single family house is now paid off, rented to a Section 8 tenant at $2,200. Almost all cash flow because the rent, the taxes and insurance, my insurance is like $28 a month there. It's ridiculously small. Look great now. Add time to the element. If you're looking at a deal that's getting $100 to $200 a month in cash flow, that's year one. What's going to happen with rents over the next 3, 5, 10 years? Watch interest rates. Maybe you can refinance in 2020. I refinanced a couple. That's another reason why I have so much better cash flow. About half my portfolio had their interest rate drop from 6 and a little over 6 to 3. Cutting the interest rate in half had a massive impact to cash flow. Buying places that have 2-bedroom, 1 bath each side, turning into 3-bedroom, 1 bath each side. Those kind of things can also increase cash flow.
I think to kind of finalize the opinion on this is, for me, I listen to people that have accomplished what I want to accomplish so they can learn the hard lessons and tell me about the hard lessons. I can reduce the amount of financial loss. I can reduce the amount of pain that I go through in learning something. But for me, if I want to do something, I follow people that have done it. I had to figure it out the first 5 years, and I made a lot of mistakes and cost myself a lot of money. But I tell you, the last 15 years, I talked to a lot of people and I learned a lot of lessons and I got really good at what I do. And so now I feel good about sharing that information with people because I know I can help save them pain and save them money and save them massive mistakes that might DQ them out of the game. And so I think whenever you're looking for somebody's viewpoint on something, you need to understand, are they really successful doing that thing or are they not? Have they done it? Do they have a track record? Because I think otherwise it's just feelings and conjecture. That's my feeling.
That's why I don't give successful marriage advice.
This is exactly why when Ashley and I have a conversation, air quotation marks, about something, I don't go to Dion.
No,
I don't need to. Nope. It's good. It's good. Jeff M. So Matt, yeah, all the entry level stuff is just getting more expensive. Can't be, Jeff. It's crashing. So what happens to those move up houses when someone needs to sell? Yes. Is that where the opportunity is? Yes. That is why I'm looking at extremely expensive homes in Las Vegas. I can't afford those extremely expensive homes, but I can afford one of them. I will get the call from one of my brokers someday. I will get the call. Hey, listen, these people, I just got a call from somebody. They want a qualified buyer. They want somebody that can close in 14 days. I'm your guy. That's how it's going to go. And you know how big of a discount I'm going to get? 20 or 30 points. The whole market isn't going to correct that much, but I'm going to get a massive discount based on somebody having to get a fast exit. I already got an awesome opportunity on a Lambo. I passed it up because I don't think it's awesome enough. And the fact of the matter is that people need that. People need that. People need the ability to exit something quickly. And when you have cash or credit and you can operate quickly, I just closed on a house in 10 days. I got an unbelievable deal. It's because I could close in 10 days. And that's why if you understand and you follow somebody that's doing what you're trying to do, you're going to end up far more successful than you ever be listening to somebody's opinions and beliefs and their opinions on how to interpret data. I always like to say the graphs and charts are great. However, I'm making the data that goes into those graphs and charts on a daily basis. So who's more qualified? I'm creating that data. I am that market. I am that data. So that's the way I look at it. Let's talk about real quickly. Jeff had asked the question about best deal. So my favorite deal ever was I have one that I bought when everyone said I shouldn't buy. It was 2010. It was a mixed use building, commercial on the first floor and residential on the second floor. Everyone said it's going to zero, don't buy it. It's going to zero, don't buy it. I was actually reminded of this deal because I was like, holy crap, I can't believe I forgot about that deal. Literally, I forgot about the terms of the deal. I bought that building for $55,000. And it just appraised for, and I put 10,000 into it. It just appraised for $332,000. I was able to pull out about 200 grand worth of equity. I was able to pull out of that deal, about 200. And it rents for 3,200 a month, the top and the bottom combined. And so that deal in and of itself, when I bought that property, I was 10 grand out of pocket to do the work. I was only 10,000 out of pocket to buy the property when I bought it. So I had a mortgage of 45 grand. So that's one of my favorites today. So yeah, so we'll kind of see, but that was one of my favorites. So I was excited about that. And there's a bunch of other deals, but you know what, really I think Dion, you can probably attest to this too. The deals that look the best are the ones that we've owned the longest.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So what is that? That answers the question of what matters most. Time. I think I bought deals that weren't particularly amazing. 14 years later, I look like Albert Einstein and with a better beard and a ton more money. Like it got ridiculous to the point of how much money some of those things make.
Ninja Vanish has a great question here, which I actually agree with. I think the premise of the question.
Do you guys think you may have not seen rent decreases because you are not running rents at the absolute maximum like some corporate landlords? I mean, my take on that is yeah, for sure.
Right. I like to run a little below area average, and I actually have an example of somebody who's in that very situation. She has a duplex. She did a really good rehab. Area maximum rents. You get a tenant in there. They're more likely to move at area maximum rents. So I don't have it like 5 or 10% below area average so that I don't have to do a decrease in the future. That would be stupid. I would rather get the maximum now and do a decrease if that ever happened. But I don't want maximum area average rents because people are in our market, at least, looking at all the rentals available. And if your area maximum is $1,000 and there's another one that's available for 900, they don't care that the counters are older. They don't care that your counters your cabinets were sanded and painted instead of replaced. They're looking at, I can save $100 a month.
Right.
So it's kind of one of the reasons why I don't do that. But that doesn't mean other people shouldn't. But you're right. Some corporate ones, if you rent, it was a couple of years there where I was renting apartments, right? Well, I rented out the house. That they were, what is every penny I could squeeze out of this? Because if you have 160 units in your apartment complex and you can get $10 a month more rent across the board, it's a massive NOI impact, which changes the value of the property a lot. So they're looking at every little penny. Whereas if you're an owner, you can actually look at what rent makes sense for my area that is not going to make the tenants leave and going to give me the best profit. And if you use the binder strategy, the tenant's happy that it went up as much as it did because it's still below area average maximums.
Yeah. Jam Smith, welcome to the channel. Good to have you here. I watch everyone, Orlando, Mindset, and you guys. I don't understand the beef. I think the beef was really just when Mindset just makes it personal and kind of goes after Zuber or goes after us calling us stooges. Like people send us that because Dion doesn't watch his content. I don't watch his content. And so people send us this stuff and they make the comments. Listen, I'm a stooge. I mean, I get it, whatever.
I'll take that as the best compliment ever. I'm sorry. I've got dad joke humor and you've seen it because no one ever laughs at my content. I'm trying to make jokes all the time. So if somebody calls me a stooge, I'm like, oh, little badge of honor on here.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't get any better than that. So I think at the end of the day, I think it's just that he's, he name calls and wants to do this stuff. At the end of the day, he can have his opinion. At the end of the day, he curates an experience for people that watch, tens of thousands of views, and that's fine. I just think that the crime comes from when you're not doing anything about the task. And I think at the end of the day, I disagree with a lot of what he says because I experienced different. I did different. I invested during the crash. I made a lot of money and I didn't have any. I house hacked. So I did a lot of those things that I had that experience and I got a very different result. You know, his result was what his result was. My result was what my result was. My result was during that crash. Honestly, if I look at one thing that I point to that made me wealthy, it was all the properties that I bought in that crash. The ones that were making my life more difficult were the ones that I bought pre-crash. But the ones that I bought during the crash or during the correction, then that was a crash. But those were the ones that made me multiple times over tons and tons of money. And so that's where I think it was, that's where I think it was a huge return. So yeah, so I don't disagree with you. I have no beef that people are out there. I just want, saying that the market's going to go down X%. I don't think Gammon's a moron because he said what he said. I think that he has a perspective. I disagree with his perspective, but he doesn't know I'm alive, but he also isn't, making fun of Dion or making fun of Mike or whatever. And so that's where I think it just, cuts to the cloth. I just share with you the facts. Because quite frankly, in all honesty, as kindly and as humbly as I can say it, a guy buying a home for his family isn't on my radar. I don't care. I want to show somebody who wants to invest. I'm not here to convince you to invest in real estate. I don't care if you do. Invest in real estate, don't invest in real estate, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you want to invest in real estate and be good at it, that's where I can help you. I can't help you. If you want to buy a single family home, if you took some of my tricks, you can probably buy it cheaper than if you weren't. But it then is a business decision that's not emotional, like I love this neighborhood type of thing. So that's where I think it's challenging, is just that I hope he gets a house. I hope he gets a house for his family. I hope he gets a great deal. But to go from crash to now making offers in a market that he still says is going to go down a whole lot, I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but that's just my opinion. So I hope he gets a house. I wish him the best. I hope he gets a great house for his family. I hope he gets a great deal. I know that's one of the things that I talked about him when I did the couple of videos I did with him. I said, just buy great deals and then you don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff.
It's healthy to disagree. I think, like I talked to early at the beginning of this video, Zuber calls flat, you call down 10 to 20. I call
disagree.
Up. Right. We disagree.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great. Ken McElroy, I watch his stuff. I'm thoroughly entertained by the dynamic of Ken and Daniil. He's decades of experience, syndications, more like all this stuff that's above my head. And she's like 3 rentals, paying them off. This is what her tenant's like. So it's a mix of absolute kind of beginner info that I like and can incorporate versus this. But at the beginning of 2020, he called for a 40% crash. Zuber bet him $10,000, said I'll $10,000 to whatever charity you want that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
No name calling. It was literally, I disagree with your call. Let's make it funny. This was somebody calling for a crash consistently for 2 years. That has been wrong for 2 years. So that's my question. I did the super chat and they ignored it. If you call for something for 2 years and it finally happens, are you right or lucky, right? Because you're calling for it and it never happened. It's okay to disagree. What's weird is when you go, you must be a creep if you have little dogs. Or if your argument lacks validity, you raise your voice and you name call. So, and here's the actual lack of intellect in the argument. We don't care if there's a crash or not a crash. He's calling for a crash, saying that we're saying there's not one coming. We're not. We're saying if a crash is coming or not a crash is coming, here's what you do. You find a great deal and you buy it. It doesn't matter if the crash is coming and you know it. He's saying there's a crash coming, so you should wait. Consistently for years, there's a crash coming every week. Here's the new reason to wait. So that's where the kind of beef comes from. There's kind of name calling going on. He tries to get the names wrong. He made a YouTube account to go on Zuber's channel called One Foreclosure at a Time, even though he's the one who's had a foreclosure and Zuber's never had one. That's the lack of intellect in a battle where the other side just has no facts to back up their data. They go to name calling and they go to humor, which gets clicks. I get it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like I said, I hope he gets a house. I hope he gets a great deal. I hope it works out for them. I mean, I have strategies that I use to help homeowners, home buyers buy their homes. I get that if you have a family, you are less likely to house hack, but you could still absolutely house hack a duplex, shared wall. I mean, how many high-end condos are there that share a wall? So what's the difference if it's a duplex? Like, then you have somebody paying a majority of your rent. So I think at the end of the day, I hope it works out for him. I hope he gets a nice house for his family. I hope that comes together for him. I'm far more concerned about the people that are in the game, that want to be in the game, that want to buy an investment property because they want to live financially free later on in life and do it quickly, like Dion did. 12 years. 12 years, right?
It took 12 years to go from a bad position to never having to work again in my life. And that's what I'm trying to share. I don't care if a crash is coming or not. That's why it's funny. If he was arguing with me that the strategy of buy and hold is not going to work when it's the one thing that makes me literally not have a schedule, then I think it would be a more fun argument.
Yeah. Salitha Berry, I'm attempting to get into a housing market, as I said earlier, but I'm in California. There are no 55K buys here. I was buying when everybody else was a coward and running. That's the only reason I got a 55K deal. It's not because my market's 55K, because I got news for you. 300K, that's not even close to the median home price where I am. Median home price where I am is 440. So I bought that deal 12 years ago or 13 years ago at 55 because I knew the market. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't afraid when everybody else was afraid. And so I bought it at 55, which is far more a reflection on me being awesome than it is about a market being cheap. I have to buy houses now that duplexes here cost $600,000, $700,000. They don't cost $300,000. So what I would tell you is, how is a regular worker to do to get in this market? A regular worker, if you are disciplined and you can find a way to live under your means for just 2 years, you can absolutely buy a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex.
House with an ADU.
House with an ADU is another option. These are all options. The issue is you have to get your money right. You have to really understand budget-wise what you're doing. You absolutely have to be doing something, going above and beyond an extra to create that extra pad of cash that you're going to need to do a buy-in. But even at $300,000, what you're telling me is at 300K, at $15,000, 15K, you can't save up 15K to buy a 300K house. I know, come at me. Way it goes, come at me. You're telling me that you can't save up 15K.
There's another way of looking at it that I think Salitha could benefit from hearing. A lot of times when somebody says, I live in a really expensive cost of living area, I can't invest here. I'm in New York City, New York. I'm in Seattle, Washington. I'm in Los Angeles, San Diego, California. It's too expensive. I can't buy here. Zuber lives in Sacramento or by Sacramento, but he invests in Fresno. So it's 2.5 hours away. My brother lives in Washington, invests in Southern California in Kern County. So right on the edge of LA County, pick the expensive area that you're in and then draw this circle out from there. You might hit ocean, so you're not going to buy there, and you might hit mountains, you're not going to buy there, but far enough north or south of where you're at. How many hours away is it before you see an equalization in rents and prices where it does start to make sense? My brother has 3 rentals in a little town called Rosemont, California, which is literally where someone's vehicle broke down, so they made a town. Doing just fine. It's on the edge of LA County, though. So you have commuters, you have an Air Force base. Maybe you go up to Bakersfield. Maybe you go to somewhere else. Maybe if you're in San Diego, you look at your different circle, or you do what Millennial Mike is doing. He lives near Seattle, a very high cost of living area, and he only makes 6 figures. So he house hacks, right? He's living in one side of a duplex, renting out the other, basically living for free in a high cost of living area. And he did have to save that owner occupied 5% down to buy the duplex. So it wasn't a 20 or 25% down in investment property down payment. Once he did that, he's now looking at Gary, Indiana, a distance investing where he had somebody that he trusted who had boots on the ground. So maybe you could find a distance to invest. Where you live doesn't dictate if you can invest or not. It changes the strategy you might use. And if you're looking at California, it's a lot bigger than the place that you live. How far from exactly where you need to live for work or family or whatever it is that's keeping you there, because I can't imagine anything that would keep me in California. how far out would you have to go to find places that do make sense? And it does start like with Matt, what Matt was saying, trying to be nice. Saving a down payment is challenging. That's why if you want to really sell a book, you're Brandon Turner, you call it How to Buy Properties with Little or No Money Down, right? Like that's the title of the book. And then he goes into it and he says, doesn't mean you don't have no money. It means you're trying to do it with ways where you don't use your own money. You still need to be able to save. You still need to be able to earn. You still need to be able to increase your income. Maintain your expenses if you can't decrease them. So don't increase them as your cash flow goes up to get in that position where you can buy and then find the strategy that's going to work.
Yes, I'm going to help. I'm going to actually have them on the channel. We've had a brutal time trying to schedule this, but I helped somebody buy a fourplex and they brought $8,300 to the closing table. A fourplex. And they live there for free and they make $500 to $800 a month, depending on what expenses come up for the building. So at the end of the day, I know it's possible. At the end of the day, you have to do the work. At the end of the day, you have to better understand your finances and $8,000. That's why for me, I don't want to hear the excuses of I can't afford a $300,000 home. No, 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 and no. If you have $60,000 saved, then I don't know what's stopping you from being able to buy a 300K house.
Well, looking for yield in an area, not thinking how far you might have to go, not considering house hacking. Like there's a lot of reasons why this is the kind of content that you need, I think, is to go, okay, I've got my 60K, which means every month you can probably add something to it. Watching interest rates, understanding a shift in the market. So something that we've had, Salitha, for the last couple of years was speed was your friend. Right. I wanted an offer in within an hour. If I see it hit the MLS, I want my agent to get back to me with the DocuSign, and I want my lender to get back to me with my letter of pre-qualification. I wanted to get my offer in before the seller knew they were going to get inundated with offers of over asking, waiving contingencies, right? Like we've had this crazy seller's market. So fast speed from 2020 got me 3 different properties. Literally, I was in within an hour. Had the sunk cost theory going on. When the seller had accepted my offer, better offer comes in later. They don't back out and go with the better offer. They already feel like they've communicated with me. That's not the case now. What you're looking for now is how are you finding your deals? If you're looking on Realtor, Redfin, Zillow, you are not going to find it. That is dated information. I usually see my deals show up on those platforms a month or two after I've closed and they say pending. For me, it could be off market. You could do mailers, drive for dollars, whatever creative strategy. I'm super lazy. I went with MLS search, but it took at least 3 agents with searches set up. One agent would never have sent me all of the deals that I have. It has to come from multiple agents with searches set up. They all know about each other. They're just trying to get me the most leads that they can so that when I want one, they're the one that gets the work. What you want to do now, instead of having speed, is watch days on market. Right, it'll fluctuate as interest rates go up and down, and buyer confidence is up because our CPI is trending down. Right, we don't know exact numbers, whether they're accurate or not, but they're not going up. So now people think, okay, I'm more confident to buy. So buying demand is coming back, and we're going to be coming into spring, so demand is going to be there too. But you can watch days on market, and if it was normal for a property to be on the MLS in your area 5 to 10 days, and all of a sudden you see one that's on there 25, 30, 35 days, you can start making offers at the numbers that make sense to you. In an area where you don't think you can find one that cash flows or makes sense as a house hack, but it's been on long enough, you make the offer that is embarrassing. Patrick Bet Davis says disrespectful offers, right? So make an 80% offer. It's been on there for a month. You're probably going to get ignored. You could find that person that has to sell and sees that there's strength in your offer. Your ability to close is more important than their ability to get the right dollar amount, and it'll line up. And so if you're not doing the work every day, not looking for those deals, not watching days on market, you're not going to be able to make the offer that does make sense. Because here's the quote of the day for me for YouTube. I think I did this in a short, so it's kind of cheating. When it comes to real estate, if you think you can, you probably will. If you think you can't, someone else probably will.
Agreed. Those are phenomenal dad Dionisms. That they're wonderful. So Salitha, I'm hard on you because I know you can do it. I know that the opportunity is out there. There's no doubt in my mind whatsoever. The person that I helped was 25 years old. 25, that's it. Not particularly stupendous credit history, not a particularly good credit score either. But the way that we structured the deal was we actually had the seller, we could offer more money and we could have the seller cover all of the closing costs. And typically a lender will allow for anywhere from 3 to 3.5% of that to be covered. That meant that instead of having to come to the table with $15,000 or $18,000, he came to the table with eight grand. That's it. So when I look at $8,000, you can, if you want to really hustle, I know all about hustle. Dion knows all about hustle. We could absolutely, if we started at 0 tomorrow, I could make 8 grand within 60 days, no problem. I could probably make 8 grand in a month, but I guarantee I can make 8 grand, and you have 60. So I think the key is there's something in the mix that you're missing, that I know that when you find it, and if you want, send me an email, give me the situation. I'll weigh in. I'll give you my opinion on the situation. And my only concern for you would be the fact that you're in LA.
So Letha, one of the things that you might find if you're in LA, here's a strategy that I've used with people who live in a really high cost of living area. There's a missed asset class. We talk about it often, but it's usually just skipped by investors. Investors aren't using the right words in their search. So if you're in LA and you're looking to be around LAX because you work there and you don't want to be too far away, you know, a triplex or fourplex, if you do go that high, you're going to want to go FHA because it's 3.5% down up to 4 units. If you can do conventional, duplex or single family, it looks better. But here's what I want you to do. If you have agents with auto searches set up for your search, we talked about a house with an ADU. We know what that means. It means it's a house with kind of 2 units on it. There's another house. It could be above the garage. It could be another structure, but we can't control what the listing agents think it's called.
Right.
So in your search with your agents, try to include all of the possible colloquialisms so you can have no matter which one they thought applied. Look for ADU, DADU, JADU, accessory dwelling unit, auxiliary dwelling unit, granny flat, mother-in-law house. List all those in your search so that if a listing agent puts his house up, most investors are looking for small multifamily. Most home buyers don't want an extra unit because they're not looking to have tenants. So you have the least amount of competition by putting in the words for the search to find the thing that the home buyer doesn't want and the investor is going to miss. So that could be for a possible house hack, or it could be that it's easier to have a cash flow from a property that has 2 sources of income. And then, I mean, if sanity ever sits in, think of moving because it's California.
Yeah, that's one of the options. The other thing too is she said that she's only seeing stuff that's $1 million or above. Well, then you're shopping in the wrong market. You're shopping in the wrong market. You don't fight the Fed. You don't fight the ticker. You don't fight, it's $1 million. You're not going to find that stuff. The best idea for you is house hacking. Like you said, try or quad. But what you need to do is something that Dion always talks about. And Dion, I'm going to try and describe this and see if I get it right. So you find where you want to be. And then you recognize that everything close by to that is $1 million. So what you want to do is you want to start building some concentric circles and getting further and further out until you find something that you can afford that also has you still within range or reason of where you're trying to get to. How do you do?
It is. And in this case, don't think you need to buy and then commute forever. It's just for now. The house hack might be 1 or 2 years,
right,
and then 1 or 2 years again. Now, 4 years from now, the income from 2 properties in a really high cost of living area is enough to where you can start looking at purchasing close to there, which you might not want to, because by then you're starting at looking at possible financial freedom being another 4 years away. But that's kind of the key to house hacking is it's you're not making a life decision to move into a place and then live there forever and have that commute forever, or be in that neighborhood forever. But can you make it make sense for now, a year or 2? And then rinse and repeat.
The market right now is better than it's ever been for seller concession. It's unbelievable. And you can it's usually capped at 3 or 3.5%, depending on the mortgage broker. But you can structure it in a way where you can walk away on a $300,000 or $400,000 house with almost no costs. I mean, very little. And that's doing it through a bank. We're talking sub 10 grand. And quite frankly, if you don't have 10 grand, then you're asking the wrong questions. You need to be getting in a place where you can save up the money. And Letha, you've already done the hardest part. You got $60,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And so you're in position where you can really be looking. You need to be building something called a buy box, which is talked about a lot on Mike Zuber's channel. You need to be looking at something called a rent box, which is something that I build on my channel. The two things that you need to really understand what it's going to cost you to buy the type of property you want to buy and shopping for it. And then two, what the actual rents are going to be when you buy that unit or buy that place so you can then rent it out. And likely, in all likelihood, you're going to be living there for either nothing or hundreds of dollars a month is likely what's going to happen. Like I said, the person that I helped, he makes $500 to $800 a month and he lives there for free. When he moves out, he's going to make $2,000 to $2,500 a month on his unit, on his building when he moves out. $2,000 to $2,500. This is somebody that only makes about $60,000 a year. That's it. So it is a complete turnaround for them.
No, and the really cool thing with that is if you really look at the impact of buying and what you can do in a couple of years. An example is Millennial Mike has a video coming out today at 5. Right, I have cheater insider knowledge, but at 5 o'clock today, video comes out from Millennial Mike on recycling capital to do a BRRRR. Like combined, now don't start with this, right? Mike is a few years in, has the 10 rentals, he's got cash flow to support this. But I want to see the numbers on the benefits of having the equity to deploy into the BRRRR and how it worked out. It isn't always just about the purchase that you're making now. It's what is that purchase going to do for you in a few years? Like a little bit ago, I talked about my friend who has maximum area average rent, so she's more likely to have turnover. She's also experienced, because of the last couple of years, like $130,000 or $140,000 in equity growth.
Right.
That doesn't suck.
No,
That's
it's
life-changing numbers.
Yeah. It is. I'm telling you that there's a way. And guys, so I was going to do a whole video about this. I probably still will, but what are you willing to do to get it? What are you willing to do to get it? So there is this one person who will remain nameless. It's not any of the guys I YouTube with, but this one person will remain nameless. But here's what I'll tell you. This person would bother me every time I saw them about, I want to buy. What are you doing differently? Well, I'm just, looking at MLS listings. Okay. I want to buy. Okay. What are you doing different? Nothing. I'm looking at MLS listings. Okay. Do you want to fix the problem? Well, I'm looking at MLS listings. No. Do you really want to buy a house? Are you willing to do more than what everyone else is to get something? Yeah, I think so. Okay, great. Here's what you do. I had him look at a list service, Batch Leads. I'm not an affiliate of theirs, but I had them look at Batch Leads. They looked at Batch Leads. They created a list based on the criteria that I kind of taught him. He looked at that criteria. He's like, I think this is going to get me what I need. He sent out a mailer. He spent $2,000 on that mailer, sending it out, actually created 2 or 3 leads from that mailer. And then he actually is closing on a 4-unit off market with seller financing. Do you want to do it or not? If you want to do it and you really want it, do what you can. Do everything you can short of being and doing illegal things. Do everything you can to make it happen. That is one of the major differences between people that get to elite and people that don't, is you're willing to do whatever it takes within the law to make it happen. So this person is now closed on and this just happened in the last 60 days, closed on a 4-unit seller financing, owner occupied. He's moving into it. He will pay monthly $0 to live there. And he's on the property ladder. If you want it, you can get it. If you don't have it, it's because you're not willing to do all that it takes within reason to get there. And it might not happen tomorrow. Everything like this is a process. We have to recognize that whatever we're doing today currently isn't working, and then look to seek out understanding from people that have done something a different way to then see what my options are, what steps I have to take. Now, could he have sent out that mailer and gotten no responses? Yup. Can he write off the $2,000 that he spent trying to find a house? Pretty sure he can. So put yourself in a position, you can go out there and grab it. You can do it. I know, because the biggest thing that I can help people do is help them understand that it's absolutely possible and that you just need to tweak your strategy. Because if you're doing your strategy and it continues not to work, the strategy is the problem, but you have to recognize that that needs to be changed in order to take something else. Dean, any closing thoughts before we wrap up for the day?
Yeah, and I want to make sure that, Salitha, you know that I'm not attacking you. I'm actually trying to help you. So please don't hate me with what I'm about to share.
That's true.
Matt, you said you made a really good point of, are you willing to do what's different to acquire what you want? So if you're looking at buying rentals because you want financial freedom, it's the goal: financial freedom, early retirement, more stability, better retirement, whatever your goal is. Are you willing to do the thing that most people won't? And you said here, Salitha, if I didn't have a government job, I would move, which I totally understand. But I want you to sit back one time and think, okay, outside of your comfort zone, outside of you're used to the job that you have now. What is the advice that you give to everyone, you personally, that says, you work for the government, I'd like to do that too. How do I do it? Almost every government employee says this exact sentence. So let me know if I'm reading your mind or if I get this totally way off. You say, you apply to work for the government, whether it's state or federal level, to get into almost any position that you can, work it for 6 months so that you can then apply to work in any position you want to. That first 6 months is challenging because you're kind of on a probationary, at will, whatever, it can change. But once you pass that, you get into the union or the whatever your role might have. And now you can look at your entire government, your municipality, your county, your state, and say, Millennial Mike, who as a first responder, is at a point where he has a choice where he can either take a promotion or stay where he's at, and he's got some like life choices to make based on he can make decisions with his job that make the most sense for his investing and raising a kid and other things like that. So Salitha, are you in a position where you're in a very expensive part of the state, but you work for the government who works all over the state? Have you been there more than 6 months? I'm guessing since you have 60,000 saved, you've probably been there a while. You're settled into your job. It feels comfortable to work there. You enjoy that. But are you willing to do what other people might not be and make that uncomfortable change to a lateral, maybe not even a promotion and maybe not a demotion, but a lateral role where you can live in a part of the state or whichever part of the government you're working for, county or whatever, where the rentals make sense? Don't hate me.
No, Dion's exactly right. One of the things that we talk about often was, I would talk to, I had a field rep that I worked with in St. Louis. And at the time, making $100,000 where I lived was like making $400,000 where he lived. And so what did I do when I started looking at the field jobs that were available to me? I started looking where in the country they were, because I realized that the company didn't pay differently based on when you lived in St. Louis versus based on when you lived in Massachusetts. And so what I realized was, holy cow, they're going to pay me exactly the same thing. And he laughed all the way to the bank. He's like, I fly to the territory all the time. He goes, but I have a massive house that costs me a fraction as much. And all I have to do is jump on planes a little more often. So it's a huge opportunity. I know that you can do it. There's no doubt in my mind. You've already done the super hard part, which is creating 6 racks. That's the hardest part. It was a long time before I had 6 racks in my name. Dion, I know for you too. You were in your 40s. I was absolutely in my 30s, I think. Or no, 20s. I was in my 20s, but it still took a long time. Felt like it anyway. When that was the goal. So I know you can do it. There's no doubt in my mind. But you guys, I hope you had an awesome time hanging out with us today. I know we had a great time hanging out with you. My live stream this Sunday, and then a special, I think I've got a special episode coming that I did with Mike and Dion in Zuber's absence. I don't think he's doing the daily financial for a while. Is that correct? Or is he going to be doing daily financial?
I don't know if he's doing the daily. He has some videos to upload. One last thing I would like to touch on as we wrap up.
Please.
Millennial Mike has that video coming out today at 5. Anybody, trying to think how I can not attack Mike, but do something sarcastic. Leave a comment on Millennial Mike's video and I'm going to use my dice to determine. I'm going to give away an hour Zoom call with me or an audiobook. If you don't want to talk to me for an hour on Zoom, you pick an audiobook, I'll buy it, put it in your account. Based on the comments on his video. Be
Okay.
creative.
And that's on Millennial Mike's.
Millennial Mike's channel today at 5 p.m.
I'll be leaving a comment just to see if I can get the dice roll to roll my way. That way I
Oh,
get
there you go. I'm pretty sure you would want the audiobook. Although doing a portfolio review with you would be kind of interesting.
Dude, we can do that anytime. That'd be awesome. But guys, thank you so much. Thanks for hanging out with us. As always, try and create great content for you, but largely we're just real estate investors that like to hang out, talk about this stuff, and hopefully, we're throwing off some heat that's helpful to you guys and some knowledge that will help you guys in your journey. Yeah, we'll see you Sunday on my live stream, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. Thanks, my friend. Thanks, DM, for hanging out. I appreciate you.
Ciao.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.